Hello everyone, and welcome to this next video in our current series in the Magdalene institutions in Ireland in the 20th century. And I'm here today with Terry Harrison. You've probably recognised Terry's face because she's been on so many videos before and her story is out there. And we're just trying to keep the story out there, Terry. Now, Terry, you have had a very, well, in many ways, sad life. And the thing that struck me about your story, all the stories are coming up the same thing, but every story has something different. And about your story, it is the fact that you were in England and you were taken back to Ireland again to have your baby, but we'll come to that shortly, right?
Okay.
Now, let's start at the very beginning, Terry. First of all, thank you for agreeing to do the interview with us. You were born in Drimna and grew up in Drimna. What was your early life like? Were you a happy child?
I was a happy child with my friends and out playing. I was a very social child, always smiling. So I've been told. So it was inside the house. We didn't know any different. And there was a lot of tension from the threat of violence.
Oh,
and
right.
My mother lived with fear all her life. So
how many of you were there, Terry? Many in your family?
There was 3 of us together, and then 8.5 years later, my other sister arrived.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your mother lived in fear?
She did. She did.
Okay.
But you have to understand, don't take it out of the time it was.
Yes.
There was no women's aid. There was nothing.
Yeah. It was a very different ball
Very
game
different
completely.
time. Yeah.
So you were working in Rathmines, in the supermarket in Rathmines.
H. Williams.
And you met your boyfriend in a pub. He was a member of a band. And you were into music as well.
I am.
And we can see the piano behind you here. You are a pianist, aren't
My
you?
Keyboards all over the place.
Yes, you're a pianist. Right, we'll come to that later. And then at 18 years of age, you found yourself pregnant.
I was just 18 when I discovered I was pregnant.
Yeah. And you didn't tell your boyfriend?
Well, I didn't know.
You didn't know? You didn't, right?
We used to call them our friends back then. And my friends were late.
Right, okay.
That's all.
That's all right, okay.
And
then you went to England?
I did.
To live with your aunt, just in case you were pregnant?
I convinced my parents to let
you go.
But the condition was that I stayed with her till I got a good job and everything else. And then, it was fine after that.
Right.
And that's how I ended up living with her. Yeah,
you lived with her and you tripped on a toy.
I did.
And you went to the doctor. And then the long and the short of the doctor confirmed that the baby is all right. Yeah. So the cat was out of the bag.
I went to a hospital. A&E department.
And you knew you were pregnant, and your aunt knew you were pregnant as well.
She only because it was only a clot in A&E.
Right. Okay.
And when the doctor dispelled his, he was leaving me and he had told me he was going to give me a week to 2 off work, that I needed to rest. I'd injured my back quite badly. And he said plenty of long, relaxing baths. And then as he was going out the door, and he said, don't be worrying, the baby's
all
fine.
Right. Oh, oops.
Then he came back. And that's when he said it to me.
Yes.
He knew the shock on my face and everything else. And he said, you did know you were pregnant. And I said, well, I wasn't sure, but I am now. And he said, Terry, I can keep you here overnight and we'll do a procedure. Excuse me. He never mentioned any other terminology, just procedure.
Procedure.
I said, first thing in the morning, and you'll be home again tomorrow afternoon, and you still can have those 2 weeks off. And he said, look, I'll leave that with you. And off he went for me to make up my mind. And that's when I discovered my little cuddles. You don't know whether your baby's a boy or a girl. So I named my unborn baby Cuddles, and I just kept massaging my tummy and going, there's a tiny, tiny new life in me. And 1 minute I was elated up in the clouds. The next minute I was shaking with fear. It was a very mixed bag. But I did know one thing.
And you were just
there was a new life in me, and that was a new life for me as well.
And you weren't going to let that go?
Oh, never. No, I'm never going back to Ireland. Ever. I never want to see the soil of Ireland again.
Now, Terry, let's move on. One day you arrived home from work to your aunt's house, and there was a priest and 2 nuns in the kitchen waiting for you. Why were they there, Terry? Tell us that. What happened to you?
Well, when I walked in, I knew I'm very big into energy, and
Yes.
I pick up
Vibes, yes.
Oh, big time.
Yes.
And I knew when the kitchen door was ajar, I was straight down the hall, and I just kept seeing this blackness. And they were conversing in my aunt's kitchen, and she was sitting at the table, and the children were nowhere to be seen. So obviously the neighbour, somebody had taken the children in and to mind them, and that's when he introduced himself from the Catholic Crusade and Rescue Society. I hadn't a clue who he was.
Catholic Crusade and Rescue Society. You were all known as a PF.
I found that out,
pregnant from Ireland.
Yeah, I found that out about 2 years ago.
Yeah,
it was all over the Commission's report, and somebody said, I, as far as I know, legally, well, whether you want to call it legally, I was the last PFI,
but brought back then,
yeah, but I doubt that very much. Yeah, probably just went.
So what happened to you with the priest and the 2 nuns there? What happened? What did they do?
Well, he informed me. The nuns very seldom spoke. He did all the talking, and then my aunt started to get upset, and she tried to question him, and he kind of hushed her up, and he just said, "Look, I'm here to let you know, to inform you that you've committed a crime and you have to leave this country.
You cannot stay here.
You cannot stay here.
You've committed a crime."
Yeah.
How did you feel about that?
I was screaming at me. I know, I was screaming. And I kept screaming at my aunt to do something, to throw him out.
She couldn't.
And then she started sobbing, and I was crying, but it didn't stop him. No.
They had your bag and all packed, hadn't they?
It was a square box, like a little school bag box, but slightly bigger. And I didn't know what the contents of that was, because the nun picked that up, and I was informed that it would be going on the plane with me. But at no time was I allowed to hold it or look at it or do anything. And I only found out when we got...
And they dragged you out to that car, didn't they? You were forced out to that car,
Yeah, and neighbours, and now the neighbour, she passed away many years ago. I used to mind her dog for her, because I'm a great lover of dogs. And she was in her garden crying. And she kept saying to me, she profoundly English, and she kept saying to him, his uniform meant nothing to her. And she kept saying to him, stop that, leave her alone.
This is the priest, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, there was a lot of people in England from all walks of life. And that's when I fell in love with London. I couldn't get over the diversity.
Yes.
The different languages, the different
small
cultures.
town Ireland, everybody knows.
And the woman in the corner in Wood Green where I used to work, she ran this little baby shop, mother care shop. And she used to call me Dearie. And she'd say, no, pink, no blue, dearie. I was starting my bottom drawer, and I buy vests, I bought baby grow, I bought lots of little things off her. But I was always dearie. My colleagues in work, I'd go to get some, no, don't do that. So unlike thousands of girls in the institutions in this country, I got a window of a beautiful time when you're going into your new motherhood, and you're an expectant mum for the first time in your life, and the life is growing inside of you. I got that. How loving and caring everybody was around me, because I was carrying new life.
It's beautiful. And you were put on the plane. You thought you were going to Dublin, but you were going...
All he kept saying to my aunt was she has to go home.
She has to go home.
The word home was used over and over and over again. But when we got out to Heathrow, he went through the customs with me. He was standing at the steps of this tiny little plane. And
to make sure you got
I never was on the plane in my life. I got the boat over. I always got the boat over.
Wait a minute. You said he was standing at the steps of the plane. So he got as far as the steps?
Yes.
Through the terminal to make... His collar got him to the steps to make sure you got on that plane.
Yeah. His uniform was higher than any land this world will know.
The priest, the collar.
He was divine messenger. He was a man of God.
And he got to the bottom of the steps.
And I wouldn't let go. I always remember they were silver, steel, freezing. And my knuckles were white because I wouldn't let them go. Because I kept saying, that won't stay up in the sky. I swear, it was too big to stay up in the sky. And the girl from Aer Lingus at the top of the steps just stared down at him. And that was it. But he got me on the plane, and I was put into a window seat, and two Americans, so tourists, sitting beside me. And I had a little ring that I bought, and I had it on my finger. And, you know, eventually I had to cut across them and call her, and kept saying, I kept thinking of my father's face in Dublin Airport. You know, it was flashing before my eyes, and I kept saying, oh, you kill me, you kill me, you kill me. Myself.
Yeah. But you arrived in Cork and you were taken to
She told me there
Bessborough.
and then. That's what she told me. And I said, well, what time do we arrive in Dublin? She said, the plane doesn't go to Dublin.
Cork.
It goes to Cork. And that's when I'm gone.
And you were taken to Bessborough. Your name was changed to Tracy.
Yeah, two nuns waiting.
Two nuns collected you at the airport.
Sister Paul and Sister Manny.
And you were taken to Bessborough. Yeah. Your name was changed to Tracy. Yeah. And you were given a number. Do you remember that? 1735.
Yeah.
You were put to work in the laundry in the basement.
When you went down the steps at the back of Bessborough, you go down, it's all cobble lock. You cross the yard and then you go down more steps. And the big laundry. Not like what the Commission reported of chores. Yeah. You know, a chore would be go to a normal wash machine and put in a little bit of a wash. Yes. These were big laundry things. And
big calendars and big rolling machines.
I think they did the overflow for the local laundry as well. Because, you know, there was an awful lot of stuff there that didn't belong to buildings.
That was too difficult for you. You couldn't manage it, so you moved to the kitchen.
Toxins.
The toxins.
When I went in,
you couldn't breathe.
I have very sensitive smells.
Right,
I couldn't smell anything. And I just remember breathing in deeply. And I'm going, oh Lord, what on earth is that? And I could feel it in my eyes as well. But I held on and I puked.
And then you moved to the kitchen.
I escorted to the kitchen.
And then later on you started to bleed, and before the baby was born. And the nun said to you, pray to God to forgive you for your filthy sins. Do you remember that being said to you?
She said, your future's in God's hands now.
Yes.
And go out and pray. Pray, pray, pray. And she also said, perhaps you may be forgiven.
For your filthy sins.
There was a huge grotto with candles and place to kneel down, and the woman and the baby, you know that statue.
Yes.
And because my mother was a devout Catholic, but I used to talk to her, mother to mother, and I used to say to her, "You're holding your baby boy in your arms, won't you mind me?" Things like that. I don't know how to pray. I did learn it in school, and it was rote learning. I probably could on memory. I know bits of the Our Father now, but the one with the woman in it, I think, is Our Lady.
It was all about religion in those days, nothing about spirituality. It was all about religion. Controlled religion. How did you escape from Bessborough? And you escaped before Niall was born. Niall wasn't actually born in Bessborough.
Nope.
Now, how did you escape from Bessborough before Niall was born? Tell us about that.
When I left Ireland to go to London, I told nobody.
Yes.
Not even
your boyfriend, yeah. Niall's dad, yes.
His boyfriend, his daddy. But when I discovered I was pregnant, I didn't get word to him, and my letters went to England, but they never came. They were never forwarded on. But then I decided, to make sure that he knew where I was. So I sneaked a letter out with the caretaker.
Yes.
And I wasn't even sure if he'd posted, but he obviously did. And then I was told I had a visitor in the parlour, and who would be visiting me? And it was Niall's daddy. So we talked about everything, about getting married and getting me out of there, and going to stay in his older sister's house.
He took you back to Dublin.
He wanted
to take you back.
This is our plans.
Yep.
The only thing we ever argued about was his name, my baby's name.
So how did Niall end up being born then in Navan Road in Dublin? How did that happen, Terry?
Because we went out for a walk, and we kept walking and walking until we got to the gates.
Yes.
And then we made our way back into Cork. We didn't even know we were on an island. And We thought the River Lee was a straight one like the Liffey. We ended up nearly going around it twice on the same bridge. And it was a very hot summer's day and I was absolutely in bits. But we found the train station and we made our way back to Dublin. And in Dublin then he went back because he had to go back to his job.
Where was that? In
where he worked.
In Dublin?
No, he worked outside Dublin. He was in Dublin a lot. It all depended on what location he was on.
Okay.
But and that was it then. I was found and brought to Navan Road on my
By
own.
whom? Who brought you to there?
A member of my family.
Oh.
Yeah. A member of my family.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you ended up in Navan Road.
I did, and you could never escape. The walls were really high and the gates were really high and the door was locked at all times, same as Bessborough. But Sister Patricia took one look at me when I went up the steps of the Navan Road. She said, "Oh, you're the Londoner, the city girl." And she just looked me up and down. She said, "Well, I'm not even bothering." She said, you remain with the same house name, same number, because the process was all done. So Sister Paul used to come up. She used to chase after me with a piece of paper that size with some scribbles on it, and I was to sign it to say she was to take my unborn baby when he was born. And I would absolutely tell her, "No, you'll never get my baby, never." But sure, little did I know the power of these people. She used to go to the judge with about 50 babies on paper. It's called rubber stamping. Sure, the judge would be having his tea and biscuits while he was stamping them all. Wouldn't even look at them. Because she wore the attire of the sacred, divine. Nobody would argue with them because they were so... people bowed down to them. As a child, I had to bend my head if a priest was walking towards me, out of respect. You know, I mean, my mother was a devout Catholic and she had all these things around the house, and my father was an atheist. So we had a very balanced upbringing.
Do you remember your birth experience when your son, your little boy here, was born?
Yeah.
Do you remember the austere situation? There was no compassion.
I woke up in the middle of the
bed.
night. I'd been hemorrhaging for 5 days at that stage. And there was an annex. It's like a wing, you know, like a mobile place, but it wasn't. It's just a long, long place with a house about 14 beds. And that's where you went out in labour to give birth. And then I think 2 days later, or a day later, you came back to the main house, as they called it, and assigned your job, and the baby went straight to the locked nursery. In my case, because I was hemorrhaging, they put me out there and I was on bed rest. But about 5 days, it's profusely hemorrhaging, but it was only when I woke up in the middle of the night and I knew that the bed was soiled, but in the dark I couldn't see. And then I went and I got out of the bed and my hands and all was covered in blood and I was screaming for help.
I'm terrified.
It was. And then they put me in a small room to give birth to him. And then he was called a dry birth.
Beautiful baby. Baby.
Because there was no moisture, no nothing. And then how he survived is beyond anybody. Because he was a full placenta previa practically. My next baby wasn't. She was a grade something, and then the next one was a grade something, and the next one. But I was actually hospitalised on them for rest. Because if the placenta goes before the baby usually drowns trying to come out. You know, so how he survived. But then he's like his
American baby. So it made perfectly clear to you that you were not going to keep this baby. You were not going to be allowed to keep this baby. Where were you going to live? Where are we going to provide for it? And nobody must know what has happened to you.
Well, that was the whole idea that we never spoke to each other in front of the clergy. We had a kind of a motto. Nobody knows you're here, so you're one of the lucky ones. And then there was others like, don't let anybody know your real name or where you come from in case you ever encounter them in your life, and that could destroy your life. You have to remember we were pariahs.
Yes.
We were treated exactly like a paedophile would be treated today. And that's the only kind of comparison I can make. But we were just really the filth of the earth. That's what we were. The only thing that used to astound me was Why
No,
would
you weren't the
anybody
filth of the
want?
earth, but to them you were.
Yeah,
That's different. Now
yeah,
that was
oh,
their problem. You
yeah.
were not the filth of the earth.
No, but to the main core of
To them, yes,
society
that,
back
yes,
then,
yes,
I lived
yes,
it,
yes.
and the people were all living in fear.
Yeah.
We feared everything because God was everywhere and could see everything, and it was all fear, control, 100% control. So you can't even judge anybody who tried to help their daughter or son and failed because it was just too much.
To fear.
Yeah.
And that stigma and shame was just too much for them to bear as well. That was an awful thing too.
Because, like I said,
Yes.
would you go to a party and say, oh, my son just got out of prison, what was he in for? Oh, he's a paedophile. The whole party would die. And you'd be
Society, the
stunned.
societal shame, society was a blame tree. So your baby was born in the Navan Road.
Yeah.
And you were told, going through all the birth trauma, you were told you won't be in such a hurry again the next time. That was said.
Be such a bad girl again, or a dirty girl again. That, you know, this was to teach me a lesson. They didn't give us any pain relief or nothing like that. In fact, while I was waiting for my son to be born, I screamed out for my mum. That's all I wanted was my mum. And they kept saying, nobody's going to hear you and nobody wants to know. You're here, sure. Does that not tell you nobody loves you? You know. And they used to tell us, you know, when we'd be working, you know, keep that up and you might get a job. Because no decent man will ever have you now. You know,
you're ruined. You're spoiled.
You're ruined goods or something like that. Used goods.
You're destroyed.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were in shock for a long time.
I think when eventually, when I was gone, all his clothes that, you know, I run them at 6 that morning, were just piled at the end of the car. And I used to hear this sound. Sometimes I might be on mop duty in the hall, and you'd be near the nurseries. There's two, one for perfect babies and one for non-perfect babies. They were never shown in the showroom. I didn't call the other place a nursery, and if you watch RTE ad, pay attention. There's no nappies, no bottles, no nothing, and they're designed for each cot in a row and a good gap between the next row, so that the buyers of these children and babies could walk up and down and select whoever they wanted.
Like a cattle market.
Yeah, well, I think a cattle market
babies
would
for
be
sale,
more respectful. Even, you know, I'm not just saying that, but they send catalogues to America and other various countries, and the same dress and the same clothes for the boys will be stripped off that child onto the next. And that's how they sold all the babies to America, the banished babies. Recently, one of them passed away, who was a terrific worker for this kind of thing.
Okay.
She devoted her life to it. Mary stayed, and you know, they got away with it because our government were paying them for the service, and if they sent inspectors,
they were doing a state service. Yeah.
If they sent an inspector out to see how we were, they never saw us. They got tea and biscuits in the parlour. So why would you question?
Everything was covered up. The showpiece
the mother, the mother of that institution. I don't know what Mother Superior, whatever they call it. Why would you question a man in white and all these lace and everything else and different colour hats and, you know, and nobody saw that was all a model of the world of the greatest business that ever this world will ever know. And in fairness, if you're starting a business, I would say to you, look to the model of the Catholic Church and you won't go wrong. And it's the truth. They're billionaires today. Billionaires.
Now, your son was taken from you by a nun. Do you remember that occasion? Can you tell us about that? The time your son was taken from?
Well, when
he was only 5. How old was he when he was taken?
So Sister Paul was allocated to be in charge of me in Bessborough. The paperwork was all in that little case that I discovered later. But when I escaped from Bessborough, I was found and put in St. Pat's on the Navan Road. And she used to come up from Cork because I was her property. The payment schemes, everything
would go to her.
Was all processed and all the paperwork. Sister Patricia in Navan Road didn't want to know me because she wasn't getting a penny
She
from
wasn't
me.
getting the penny.
Yeah.
So, Terry, you left Navan Road. Where did you go after that?
Didn't leave, I was released.
You released, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
And where did you go?
I was driven to the boat. They didn't get me a plane back to England.
You went back to England.
Oh yeah, an awful lot of us got tickets for the boat. They wanted us out of the system because my social welfare number would show up if I remained in Dublin or any part of Ireland for that. So an awful lot of us got a ticket for the cattle boat. It was a really bad crossing, but it was for you to get out of Ireland where nobody'd know you, and you might have a hope of getting. Some of them were referred as cleaners or housekeepers by the nuns. You might get a link, to work in a parish priest's house over there or wherever. But it was always cleaning jobs and things like that. But yeah, the majority of us used to get a ticket for the boat.
And Terry, a friend of yours managed to get her child back.
She did, Claire.
And you tried to get Niall back. Tell us about that.
She told me how easy it was.
Yeah.
She said, you never signed a thing and you haven't gone into that. She said, the law says you can go and get him. And I said, don't be silly. They're not going to give him back to me. Now, I was in London at the time. And then I had left and come home for the Christmas, intending to go back, pretending I was home for Christmas. And my father had a bad accident and he begged me to stay. So I did. And that's when I was working again in a shop. And she rang me, Claire. We had kept in touch with each other. And she was from Northern Ireland. And she was actually sent down to the Republic to have her baby. And I always remember baby Johnny. But she rang me and told me how easy it was. But her baby was still in the nursery in Navan Road.
In Navan Road, yes.
So I said to her, what? And she said, no, just get in touch with
But Niall had already been adopted at this stage, already been given away.
I didn't know that, no.
You didn't know that?
No, I did not. As far as I knew.
So you took her advice, and what did you do?
Sister Paul brought him from Pat's to Bessborough and put him in the nursery in Bessborough. The place that I had ran away from. She brought him back to him. And I saw the babies when mammies were thrown out. And what happened to them and who looked after them. And maybe you couldn't even call it looking after them. But I only found this later. But when I rang, I told her, I didn't ask her. I said, have my baby ready on Friday. I'm coming down and I'm getting such a train. So I should reach St. Anne's in Paul Street.
St. Anne's was the Adoption Society, yeah.
Yeah. And Sister Paul worked for them.
Right. So.
She never stayed in Bessborough. She wasn't one of those nuns. She was, it turns out that she hadn't even got any accreditation, but she pretended to be something like a social worker. It was amazing that you'd believe them. And sure, we didn't know anything about the 1952 Adoption Act. We weren't told anything about our bodies. I'd be going around asking other girls, does this happen? Does that happen? Same as when I had, slight bleeds. I thought I was getting my friends light and that's what happened. And then a girl in the kitchen said to me, no, Terry, or Tracy, I don't think we get our friends when we're pregnant. And she said to me to go to that nun. And I picked the nun that I thought would be the nicest. And she told me to pray.
And when you faced her across the table, what happened?
She stood up and there was the old-fashioned phones. They were huge with the big handles on them. And I had been seated and I kept looking around or listening out for a baby. Because there was one door into that little office. And I had friends with me who I was going to live with. I didn't care then about anybody. And she ushered them outside because she said to them, are you a relative of Terry's? Are you related? And of course they said no. And she said, well, then you've no business in this office. And I wouldn't mind the paths were so narrow and it's a freezing cold day, and she threw them out onto the path. And John O'Mahony stood the whole time behind her. And he was her boss. She reported into him. But she was the one that was doing all this talking.
And she threatened you.
She leaned over me and she put the handle right into the side of my face. And she said, see this phone? I'm going to use it now and I have calls to make. But the first one is I'm going to ring your father in his place of work to inform him. The second one is I'm going to get in touch with the national newspapers and put it all over him. But the third one, she says, I hope you have a lot of money, little girl or something like that she called me. She said, because we're going to see each other in the High Courts. And
then she threatened to call the guards.
Yeah, if I didn't leave. I'd bought one of those zip-up bags from, I'd bought loads of stuff to bring him home in. And I always remember with all the empty stuff, I don't know what we did with it. I have no idea. I just cried the whole way home. But I got the impression of the couple that was with me that he didn't believe me, because he kept saying all the way home, you told us he was still your baby. He was your son. Well, how could they keep him if he was your son? Sure. Who could you tell?
You did get married.
A few years later.
Yes, and you had more children.
I did. I had 3 more after Niall.
Sue, Brian, and Louise.
Yeah.
And they knew about all this, did they?
No, not till they were in their teens.
Not in their teens, but they know now. They know about it now, yes.
Yeah, I think they were able to understand it better, because there was a shadow child living with us at all times, and that was Niall.
Yes, of course.
No matter where we were, he was there, and I pictured the age he was at. And I used to put a present under the tree for him, and wherever boy came in around his age would be lucky enough to get it. You know, it was things like that. But Mammy was not always there. Mammy would go off into the clouds. I was living in a very, very sharp, closed cocoon of a bubble, because if I left my bubble, I'd have to deal with reality. You see, for some reason, I was always waiting on a knock on the door. I really was. Genuinely. There's been a huge mistake. Here's your son back. Of course, we all know that was never going to happen, but not in Terry's mind. And if I heard his name, Niall, I'd jump. If you told me that, you know, your sister had adopted a child, you were my best friend.
Yes, yeah.
I'd get all the information out of you. And the best of all was in hospitals, especially the maternity ones. You'd get loads of information off expecting mums, new mums, zodiac signs. You know, I'd work out the birthdays, you know. And I said, oh, no, it's not him.
And on his birthday every year, you did something special. Tell us about that.
I'd get up. He was born at 6:30 in the morning. He weighed 6 pounds, 6 ounces. He was born on a Monday morning. But, yeah, exactly 6:30. Sometimes it was a little muffin. Sometimes it was, you know, God knows what it was. But I'd always have the candle. I light it, and I'd sing happy birthday to him. And I'd put my dressing gown on. I always took the day off work. It was a black day for me. I just cried the whole day, and I just boiled me. I throw everything into this thing, this instrument behind me. I channel everything into it, and then when it gets
that was your
back
release mechanism there, the piano. Yeah.
My other son only told me recently that when he was a small boy coming in from school, and the 3 of them usually came in together, he'd say to his other sister, say, "Oh no, don't go near Mom. She's in very bad form." From what I would be playing. I never knew
you
that.
You taking it out in the piano.
Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah.
You are very active at the moment in helping people who have been through this kind of experience. Tell us about that. What do you do?
I support people that have suffered.
Mm-hmm.
We are not the ones with the shame.
No.
The society is.
Yeah.
From the top to the whole way across. I always try and help other women. Please, put the shame where it should be owned. You know, how can a life giver, an expectant mum, a new mum, have any shame? I remember girls crying out. You're waiting on a familiar face. You're waiting on somebody to go, oh, your baby boy is beautiful. Oh, your baby girl is beautiful.
But it wasn't happening here.
Never happened. You know, when I came back from the hospital, there was a bar of soap, carbolic soap, left on the locker. Now, that was a kind gesture. One of the nuns had left it there for me. But to this day, it resembles what I did for years. I used to scrub myself in the shower and I'd bleed.
Because you were dirty, you thought you were dirty.
The only thing that's
the guilt and the shame. Yes.
If I went into meetings in Leinster House, politicians, I've met and conversed with members of the clergy. I don't hold them responsible for what their whole organisation is doing, but I hold them responsible for remaining in it. If I was in a golf club and we found out that the whole board was running paedophile stuff and taking people into prisons, that's the only other word for them, prison camps, actually, because there was nobody to
They
tell
were
them what to do.
prisons.
I would leave that instantly, you know. And that's the only thing I have against genuinely good men and women who devote their lives to helping people. Why are they remaining in a place that shipped them and sent them from that school to that school only down the road? I mean, the last count of your man in America was 958 people, targets. I call myself a target. Another thing I don't use is I'm nobody's victim. I was a walking target. I was vulnerable, alone. And when the door closed in Bessborough that first night after the flight, I was dehydrated. I felt very sick, very lightheaded. And I remember that I never seen ceiling so high in my life in the hallway. And I was consumed with this sense of fear, of energy in there. But I just looked at the door and the click it made, it was a big, big, heavy door. And that click stays with me to this day because that's the most alone I've ever been in my entire life. And that's the last time I remember me as who I was. I started to become invisible when he threw me in the car in North London. And then I got more invisible on the plane. And when that door closed and she gave me that new number, I
Was
knew
your identity gone completely?
I was gone. The only thing I ever tried to hold on to was my dignity. That's all I had.
You don't like the term birth mother?
No.
Why not?
Well, number one, it was contrived completely by want-to-be adopted people who were involved in the 1952 Adoption Act.
Mm-hmm.
And when the word mother would come up repeatedly in different paragraphs, and they put up a big argument saying, no, that's too confusing to our children. There's only one mother, and that's us. So maybe if we identify these women as birth mothers, they only gave birth, they're not mothers.
Yeah.
And that's how that came to be.
And also mother and baby homes. It's the home part you have a problem with, isn't it?
Yeah, well, actually, it should be mother and children institution because there was 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds still getting paid for by the state in the same
Habitation
place as
fee.
me.
Every child they had, they got money for it, yes.
Yeah. So they weren't babies.
No.
There's little remains and tombs that are not babies. But everybody just says mother and babies. There was women in there who lost their babies because of hard work. Maybe they should have been like me on bed rest. Do you know, there's all sorts of things that can happen when you're pregnant. But you can also be a human. Whether we were male or female, you could get a sore ear. You could get an abscess on your gum.
But you weren't
You
treated
could
as
get an
humans.
infection. If you were down the road from Navan Road, you'd be in a prison in Mountjoy. Guard. Get me a dentist. Guard. My glasses broke. Get me an optician. Guard. In these places,
there was nothing.
I stayed up all night trying to get like a poisonous look of stuff that came out of an abscess that burst. Thankfully, it burst. And we couldn't get the stain out of the pillow. And our only concern was, what will the nun say when she sees the stain in the pillow? Does that tell you something? Mm-hmm. You couldn't go and say, I have a sore throat. When he was pushing me up the steps, I wore glasses my whole life. This side glass here was all cracked. Mm-hmm. So everywhere I went after that, like, I couldn't see well. You know, that didn't matter. You weren't a human. They dehumanized us the minute we walked.
You were a commodity. You were a commodity.
No, this was the commodity.
This was the commodity.
Yeah. They're not interested in us. There was no postnatal. There was no
aftercare.
Nothing. There wasn't one girl in all the years and all the groups and all the women I've met ever got a 6 weeks checkup or was told about it.
And the baby had a price in its head.
Absolutely. That was a very expensive. The priest in England, I believe, told somebody that they only did it because they were very concerned about these babies being lost to Protestants in England. Yes. And so once they got them back on Irish soil, they knew they could become. Yeah. But the only thing you had to have to adopt a baby in this country was a good wallet, and you had to be a Roman Catholic.
Yeah. What does that tell you? Same with American ones, they had to be Catholic.
Oh, yeah, but they were all in vacuums of little communities. The church never took over an entire country like us because there was no country small enough. They took communities, and I saw the Irish community in London, in Boston, in other places I've travelled to, and they're profoundly Irish Catholic.
Yes.
You know,
Catholicism, Irish
and
style.
they're really,
yes.
like, if you look at Boston,
And they won't hear anything against the Catholic Church. They're
No.
very solid
Yeah.
members. Yeah.
Yeah, because they believe what they're telling you.
Yeah.
They do.
And you also had difficulty with the word repatriation that happened to you,
I
taken
wasn't
back
even
to
sure
this
what
country.
that meant. Somebody had to explain that one to me, because I had read it about the PFIs in the Commission report, and I had no idea who they were talking about. I never associated it with me till an actual member of the media rang me and said, "Terry, do you not realise you can recognise yourself in the Commission?" And I said, "No. How?" She said, "Because I think you were the last PFI." I said, "What's a PFI?" Imagine nearly 50 years later finding out you were a PFI, pregnant from Ireland. And yet, in my paperwork from the girl in the hospital who started it all, she was what I call a cell for the Catholic Crusade and Rescue Society. She was a senior year social worker doing her
She came in to
placement.
visit you with the clipboard and all.
Yeah, and I thought she was admin. So she was firing away the questions. I was never in the hospital. I just knew there was admin workers, and you had to give your number, your date of birth and all that. And then she just fired at me and, "Well, where's your husband?" And I said, "Oh, he's off working up north. He works all over the place." And she said to me, "Where?" And I didn't know a single place, and I just straight up Leeds. And that was just pure luck. And that's still on the paperwork. And it says referral to the Catholic Crusade Rescue Society in a little box. It says anti. Anti who? Anti where?
Rescue Society.
Yeah,
Rescue
Catholic
Society.
Crusade and Rescue Society. Yeah.
Oh dear.
And everything I disclosed to that girl is on that paperwork. He's from Leeds. He's an Englishman. And he worked away from home and all of that. And then apparently he only had one lung. I don't know where I got that one from, but that's what they
You
said.
made that up in the spur of the moment, did
I
you?
must have. I don't even remember. But when you're reading it, like, she took it all down, and that's what's in my records. So how could the Catholic Crusade and Rescue Society say I'm pregnant from Ireland when this so-called man from Leeds was never in Ireland in his life, and he's the father? Where was his rights as an Englishman? I was in America. I was a part of a study group, Women and Minorities, in '98, and I was invited by the American government to do that. They selected me from the National Women's Council. I was the director.
Okay.
They interviewed us all, and I couldn't believe it, because a lot of the women there had sentences after their names. You know, I was in the throes of my degree at that stage, but you know, you're a new kid on the block, really. I was a member for a long time, but never on the board of directors. And after interview, and then I just got the call to say I was selected. 9 different states that spanned. 9 different states. Every state had either a women's group or a minority group. And it was absolutely wonderful. And it's amazing, like, what you bring back, and the people you meet. But I'm still always going to be just me, you know. And they were my silent years too. My one and only granddaughter, she's 25.
You have a granddaughter 25.
She's
Oh my
living
goodness.
in Australia. There, she's up there behind you, Eileen. You can see her. That was taken a
Beautiful.
few years ago, and she's all over the place. But
Have you been out to Australia to them?
no, she told Michael, you know, just knock me out, whatever. Even if I'm on the life support machine, just get me on the plane. I don't like planes, Eileen. And I had to fly in my place of work. I was flying around everywhere, and I still could never. Your first encounter with a plane
Was you going to Bessborough and that's Cork?
But it was the fact that you know, I'd never
The
been
terrors
so
that you-
close to a plane,
Yes.
and I see them up in the sky, and they're only little things, you know, up at a distance. But when you're standing beside this little one, and I don't know how many seats it was small. I just said, how will that stay up in the air?
How will it get? Never mind, stay up.
Give me a boat any day, okay, a boat can sink and wherever else, but you're on sea, you know. You're not floating in a capsule, as I call them.
Yes.
You know, flying
Well, look,
capsule.
Terry, it has
Sorry.
been lovely speaking to you, and thank you very, very much for your story.
You're
Now, I know nothing of this is new. It's already out there. We're just hoping to keep it out there because you've got to keep this stuff coming back and back and back. Otherwise, it will just disappear and be forgotten.
like our government would like.
Yes, like our government.
Everything
like,
is
we would have to keep
archived
it
or
coming out
buried.
there. Yes.
But the one thing they don't know, transitional generation trauma is actually very real.
Yes.
And it flows down from one generation to the next.
Yep.
And until they actually put their hands up, like many countries have had to, and say, yes, this happened. We're sorry. How can we help?
But they're not doing
You know, I mean, no healthcare, no nothing in that Judas bill. And then you had to be by hours, not months. It says 6 months. It says not 6 months, 6 months to 12 months.
Okay.
But if you're 3 hours short of
You don't
6
go,
months,
yeah.
you're not covered. So you get, well, somebody was there for a day, say. And the language in the
Loopholes
media,
everywhere. Loopholes, and they will
loopholes
find them.
everywhere.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
an enhanced medical card just means you don't pay the levy in the pharmacy. But however, say you're short of a few hours, you won't get that either. You know, it's despicable. And I know some women who actually were awarded 10. And I said, did you get your enhanced medical card? No, we were short of so many hours for that. So this is what they're up against. But the whole idea of it, Eileen, is we are a wonderful country of very, very, very. Let's just get on with life.
Ostrich Act.
Yeah, just bury it. It'll go away under
Go
the
away.
carpet, in the closet, in the cupboard.
We just don't want
We
to
don't
know.
want to deal with conflict of any form.
Because it's too ugly. We don't want to see ourselves. We
Yeah.
don't want to face it in ourselves.
But I think the
It's too
truth always
hurtful.
sets you free.
Yeah.
And you can
course.
live your life and you can heal.
Yes.
That's all I've ever wanted.
But you have to face it and own it
Yeah.
before you heal.
And let it go. Closure. It's called closure. You know, we're going to find our healing together. We do not need the government or anybody to help us with that because that belongs to us.
Yeah.
But there's so many people like him out there and so many people like me for years and years and years zipped it. Silence. You knew.
Because of the shame that they made
you
you
brought
feel.
a subject
Yes.
out in a conversation of any description, whether it be work colleagues, social, informal, it doesn't matter. Once the elephant in the room was created, the atmosphere and everything, and that's when I was doing my groups for years, I'd say to women who hadn't come out, be very, very choosy about who you come out to. Know your audience. Because the last thing I wanted them to have was somebody to react hostile towards them or call them names or judge them, which many people will judge.
Of course.
You know, and that's what I was afraid for them. But I've had 2 people in their lives heartbroken over the silence. And one was a daughter who adored her mother. And her mother adored her, but she never told her. And it'll always come out. And when she found out, that hurt more than anything in her life because she believed her mother loved her enough to trust her, you know, to share that with that she had an older sister, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the poor woman kept saying, and there's a few still going around and I'm still working on them.
Yeah.
You love your son so much. Imagine doing that to him. Let him put his arms around you and say, Mammy, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Because I feel in my heart that's what the kind of lad he is. He would. But she's terrified. See, rural Ireland.
Small town, rural Ireland, yes.
It's a different ball game entirely.
And all the anonymity you get in London and England and
Dublin.
Yes, and Dublin.
Yeah, yeah. Can you imagine if I was in a village?
Oh.
Whew. I don't know what they would have done with me by now, to be honest. But no, I'm not. I'll never be a hermit. And the one thing I always said, whoever has my baby boy, just love him. Just love him.
Adoptive parents weren't.
No. And then the adopted father died when he was very young. But then they were very old. They would never have gotten a child off the HSE if they'd gone to Hawkins House. That's why I go to the private places that were run by clergy. Anybody over the age of 40 or under the age of 25, it's in the Adoption 52 Act. You know what the worst part for me was finding out? And I had to share with other women, even though I knew it was going to hurt them. In the Adoption Act, we had 7 years. 7 years to find a roof over our heads, a job, a way of maintaining and looking after our own child. Nobody ever told any of us that. And that's exactly the money that they got. because the state would pay 7 years foster care, and we could go and visit our own child in the foster home while we were getting ourselves together. These are all laws, not clergy made. No. Laws.
State collusion, state and church.
Yeah. Well, the church was our state.
The church was
so they overlooked the real legalities of any law books, which we
deference
inherited
to the
from
church
Britain.
at all times. Once again, Terry, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
This conversation, you're right. This conversation must still go on.
Yes.
We don't need the state's approval anymore. We don't.
Nor the churches.
Oh, no, we certainly do. Which one? There's that many, and it's wonderful. I have the greatest respect for anybody who has real faith. And I know people with real faith because you can feel it from their hearts, and they're the true religious people. Anybody, I just say...
Hypocrisy. Hypocrisy.
But no, I've got aunts in their 80s, and they've been fed this their whole lives, and the hereafter and all of it. And I just keep saying, talk to your God from your heart. Whether it be a male, a female, an energy ball, I don't care. And they're the people I love because they don't need to be controlled. They don't need to go to a man in a dress and say to him, why should I do this or how should I do that? They look and have faith in their maker. And the universe, I'm very big into the universe. I'm very spiritual, and I just love the
big difference in religion and spirituality.
Yeah, I don't pray. I write music and
commune.
But I might send it out into the atmosphere.
Through your music, that's your...
Yeah, I used to talk to him every day of his life, through the atmosphere. We're all made of energy.
Yep,
every one of us. So
vibration and frequency. Yes. And thank you all for watching. And until we meet again, slán go fóill.